The time is 1860. The emergence of the middle class has brought about the end to power of the Tokugawa dynasty. A samurai, once a dedicated warrior in the employ of royalty, now finds himself with no master to serve, other than his own will to survive, and no devices other than his wit and sword.
Hey
everyone, Genome here, coming to you with the next review in my movie review series. In this series, I've been taking a look back at some classic movies by none other than famed Japanese filmmaker Akira Kurosawa. And this one is possibly his most famous work. Maybe Seven Samurai is, but this is the one that I watched first. And that was courtesy of the man who not only did the intro voiceover, but also provided me the movies so I could actually watch them and recommend them to me. And that's none other than Jay from OvereasyMode. There'll be a link to his channel in the description below. Please go give him a like, subscribe, sub, watch his videos. They're great. So thanks once again, Jay, for turning me on to such a great series of movies. And while this one doesn't have any express tie-in with Seven Samurai, you will see a lot of the same actors and actresses in this movie. So, yes, we're talking about none other than Yojimbo. Yojimbo is from 1961, and it is an all-time classic that was pretty much remade, shot for shot, in a movie I shall not name. Let's not name drop too much here, but let's just say that there was an Italian filmmaker involved in Clint Eastwood, right? There was a lot of legal issues over it. A lot of legal wrangling and all that, so whatever the case may be, there was basically a shot-for-shot remake of this movie because it was so influential. To the review itself, I'm doing it a little bit different. I'm going to somewhat keep it in my standard, tell you a little bit about the plot and story, and then get on to my pros and cons. But I really don't want to give away too much of the plot and story for this, so I would just go with a very, very simple plot synopsis. And really, it doesn't require anything too complicated because this movie at its heart is very simple, right? It's basically about one man making his way through the world. And we're talking about none other than Sanjuro. He takes on different surnames in the series depending on what's around him. Changing his name, it was kind of a tried and true thing for Ronin back there because this guy is a Ronin samurai. So, we're led off right from the very beginning to him wandering the roads, and we kind of see just how free this guy is because he lets fate completely dictate where he goes by throwing a stick into the air and following where it points. And as he gets closer to the town, we find out that looks like, we're getting some ill omens. Looks like this could be a bad place he's going to. And he arrives, and there's all kinds of bad stuff going on. And he takes up residence at this little restaurant, right, owned by a very cantankerous old man. And I'm not going to name everybody because I'll probably butcher names, but his name is Gonji, and he's played by Ejiro Tono. But those two really sort of hit it off, but in a very, offhand kind of way. You see, Sanjuro feigns indifference to everything in this movie, right? But we do find out later on that he has a deep down code, and basically he just kind of like Kane and Kung Fu, but way pre-Kane Kung Fu. He's just out there to do good deeds for good deeds, sake. There's no other reason. He doesn't take money for it, even though he constantly asks for money from the bad guys in this movie. And but that's not really his goal at all. He just wants to eat and live his life and help people where he can, but he's very gruff and doesn't speak a lot until he's laying out his plans. So Yes, he comes to town and finds there's two warring factions in town. Basically, the sake brewer and the brothel owner slash silk merchant. There's a lot going on there. And he plays both ends across the middle, and it's quite a tangled web that he weaves.
おい、この騒ぎもおめえの筋書きか。
半分はな。後の半分は小野助の野郎が書き換えやった。
And interwoven throughout is a lot of character building for not only Sanjuro, but the other players around him. We find out that the restaurant owner is probably not all as crabby as we're led to believe, which he kind of off-put me at first, but upon further watches, I see what's going on. It's just that circumstances of the town have made him that way, right? And he cares deeply about the people in the town as well. And he sees Sanjuro kind of come in and just adding to the chaos at first, because he doesn't see the overall plan, right?
とにかくこの宿場はもうおしまいだ。分かったかね、お侍。こんなところにいるとこの毒気に当てられてろくなことにはなんねえ。
We have opposite of Mifune, we have Tatsuya Nakadai. He's playing Unasoki. He's labeled as a gunfighter in IMDb because he has this pistol. He has a 6-shooter that he smuggles in to town, right? And he's just flashing it everywhere, and he's always shooting it off. So it's his thing, right?
Hello. こいつとっても強いんだぜ。
So he's not a swordsmith, right? So as opposed to the more traditional Sanjuro character, who is a samurai, walking samurai, so he lives by the sword. You got Sibei is basically the brothel owner, and Ushitora is his old first-in-command who broke out on his own, started his own rival gang, and does sake brewing now. And they've each installed their own puppet mayor to try to run the town. But it's quite a tangled web, and there are lots and lots of players, both bit and more substantial. And basically, Sanjuro plays them all like a fiddle. That's what he does. He uses their own greed against him. So that's where he comes in, or comes ahead of them much more in intelligence, because they live for greed and power. And since he's not concerned with those things, he can see clearly the problems and the solutions for them, right? If he was a greedy man, he could be sitting there and make a lot of money off these guys. But, the bad guys are not to be trusted. He learns this very early, because they're each trying to hire his services as a bodyguard, right? Because he cuts down a couple of rogues at the very beginning just for to make his point of who he is, and then that starts the bidding war between them. But originally speaking, he was going to go work for Sibei. This is just, there's a lot of setup here. But Sibei's wife, Oren, actually double crosses him before he's even really hired. And some of the most memorable lines of the movie are in this little section right here. In fact, my absolute favorite line in this entire movie is spoken by Oren, who is actually probably my favorite character in this movie. I love her. She's played by Isuzu Yamada. Just great role, man. She is like the... she runs that house. You can tell who runs the house. And she berates her son in this classic line. And she's so good. She's not, you don't see her too much in this movie, but she has some good back and forth too with what is his name? I'm trying to remember. Inokichi. And he's actually, I remember him from Seven Samurai. Well, a lot of these guys are carryover from Seven Samurai, played by Daisuke Kato, and they have some good back and forth in the restaurant and all that. There's a lot of good stuff between the bit players in this movie. But really, the scene stealer of everything that he's in is Toshiro Mifune, and he puts as much care into the Sanjuro character as he did in the Lord Kichio character he did in Seven Samurai, right? But it's a completely reversed dynamic, right? Now he's the cool, calm, and collected samurai. He's a Ronin, right? He's not a pretender. He actually is. And what's funny is it gives this character a real insight to the workings of plots and all that and schemes, right? Because these really are just small-time hoods, what they really are. They have an inflated sense of themselves, and he's obviously worked around the big games. He worked for daimyos, whatever, right? And maybe worked in the courts itself, so he knows, like, he knows the game from, like, the top down. So these guys are bringing nothing to the table, so that's another reason he can play them so easily, not only just because they're greed, because he's got experience in such matters, right? But he is an able swordsman, and we see several times throughout this movie just how superior he is to basically everybody else in at least swordplay in the movie. And but yeah, he steals every scene because, like I said, unlike before where he's overly demonstrative and kind of crazy and pure id, this one is very calm, cool, and collected. He walks with dignity. He walks back straight, right? He doesn't speak much. He gives long, thoughtful pauses before he says anything. He looks at you for a while. He's got these little mannerisms he's constantly doing, like he's kind of scratching at his neck or rubbing on his chest. He always wears his arms inside his kimono, right? And he's kind of just always like touching his neck or something. And like that's just, I don't know. That's when you tell he starts to think about things. It's an interesting little character trait that he gave him. And I don't know if that was Kurosawa's idea or Mifune's, but whatever the case may be, it's very effective. And he just steals the show as always. Right up to the iconic ending, and I won't give away any of that or even show any of that because I want you to watch the movie for yourself. It's only about 90 minutes, and like I said, just go watch it and you'll see. But there's a lot of quiet in this movie and a lot of areas with absolutely no background music, which is a nice plus. We'll get onto that in the pluses, or yeah, pros and cons. But yeah, let's just say there's a great cast of characters in here, and there's a lot of plot and intrigue going on, and you might be surprised by how things turn out. So that is a very vague plot synopsis for the movie. So let's get into some pros and cons, and then we'll go on to an actual scoring here. I'll start with the cons because there's almost none, really. At first, I found there's a couple of characters in there, and Jay actually told me this is purposeful from their acting school, right? Who kind of overexpress a bit. Old man at first is kind of overly bitter and kind of venomous in a way, but he eases up throughout the movie as he realizes the character of Sanjuro. So I can look past that a little bit. So that might be a little off-putting to some at first, but there's actually very little of that in this movie. So it's a very, very minor nitpick. There's really not too much else I can find wrong with this. You know, some might not like the theme music. But it's jarring and it's cool. I don't know. It's hard to explain what it's even like. It does come out of nowhere, like, right? Because all the other music in this movie is pretty much soft, ambient music. And once again, there's a lot of very quiet moments in this movie. But so the main theme might not be everyone's liking, but I mean, how bad are you going to ding a movie for a main theme that maybe doesn't fit perfectly? Who knows? It's different. I believe Kurosawa actually asked for something that didn't sound anything like what people were expecting. So, yeah, you know, Sanjuro is a gunslinger with no gun, and he has music that's or appropriate theme to that, I guess. I don't know. Whatever the case may be, that may not be everyone's cup of tea. But I mean, really, I can't think of anything else that's a con in this movie. It's really close to being perfect. So let's get on some pros. Oh my gosh, the acting. Let's start with the acting. Every role is so perfectly cast. You got Ushitara's like half-wit, they can call him that, half-wit brother. Inokichi, right? And he's always like got his lower lip. He's biting on his lower lip, and they show this really funny scene at the beginning where he asked the coffin maker, did you make any coffins today? Because he's making them for both sides, and he's like, I made 2 for your side, right? And he's like getting mad, really? But he says like, I made 4 for the other side, and then you see him like, because he's so slow, he had to count it on his fingers. It was just a great little character moment, and he's like exceptionally vicious, but he's also like, I don't know, he's like the big dumb dog that everyone likes to follow you around. So it's hard to hate the guy, but he does do some pretty nasty things later on. You have a great bad guy in Unosuke. Even though he doesn't do too terribly much, he just looks so slimy and vile. And actually, he reprises another bad guy role in Sanjuro, the follow-up to this movie. But so he's a wonderfully oily bad guy. And then you got, of course, Sibe and Ushitora, the 2 warlords, basically the 2 guys trying to run the town. They're both well played. What can I say? There's 2 mayors, but they don't get a whole lot of stuff. In fact, one of the mayors, Tukiman, who is like the big sake brewer, who is like aligned himself with Ushitora, was Kanbei. It was Kanbei from Seven Samurai, the main samurai. So it's just a fun little thing to notice there. But outside of that, my 2 favorite characters are definitely Orin, like I said earlier, the the wife. Oh man, Osibe. She's just, I just find her hilarious, man. And but she's like a cold-hearted woman, man. She's like the mama-san to all the girls, and she like locks them up. She's brutal. Even when the house is on fire, she's still trying to keep the girls from escaping. So she's not a nice person either, right? And she's the one that tries to betray Sanjuro from the outset. So she's not a nice lady, but I love her character. She's so well played. And of course, Toshiro Mifune as Sanjuro is just incredible. Chews the scenery and just breathes life into this character. You can really get an idea of what he's made of with very little few words, right? He cares deeply. He's the one to admit it. So, what else, man? Acting is great. Cinematography is amazing. This movie is made in 1961, shot in black and white. You would think it would look garbage, but it's crystal clear. The sets are stupendous. I love the little restaurant that he's in for a lot of the movie. The homes themselves of, the 2 warlords look really cool. They're elaborate. Just nice costume, set design. Everything looks really spot on. And there's a lot of like players in this. He has a couple of scenes where basically 2 rival factions are facing off in the street, and they're like, like whole platoons of people out there wielding swords and dressed period specific. So it's very impressive. So that, it just looks crystal clear, sharp. There's a lot of nice movements in the camera where it'll track people. That's nice too, and interesting camera angles. Just a lot of good stuff. But the sets are so realistic, and it just, I don't know, it just really immerses you so well. There's a couple scenes where it's downpouring rain, and they're kind of sitting in, and you're just listening to the rain. That's the noise in the background. It's all you hear is the rain pattering down. It's lovely.
何でも知ってるんだな。その町役人を殺させたのはおめえの差し金か。そうかもしれない。
And that kind of leads into the soundtrack and or basically the score of the movie. The score is very spare. There's not a whole lot of actual music in this movie. It comes in during important points sometimes. And some points are actually done almost in pure silence, like even some sword fights. There's like no music going on. So that's cool. I like it. I like a director that has enough courage to let silence reign for a few minutes, and that just draws me in as a viewer. There's a lot of action sequences kind of, interspersed in, but they are quick and they're brutal and they're not overly glamorized or glorified. Sword fights are 1 and 2 hack affairs. They are not like parry thrust for 5 minutes. It's not a lightsaber duel, right? It's a lot more realistic. One slice and that person's on and Sanjuro's moving on. He fights multiple combatants a couple times in this movie, but really, like I said, there's some scenes of really excessive violence in this movie. But I don't think it's not done to glamorize the violence, right? And actually, it kind of makes your stomach clench, like when you see one of the warlords and his whole family basically get butchered. It's brutal, especially when they're all unarmed and helpless at that time. Innocent people get killed. It is what it is, man. Life was cheap, and while this movie doesn't sit there and linger on it too much, there's quite a bit of violence in this movie. But like I said, it's not like a wall-to-wall war fest, right? In fact, there's way less death and destruction in this than in Seven Samurai. It's just that it's just more personal because everyone's got a face for the most part in here, and but he's not mowing down legions of people, right? But he does kill quite a few people in this movie, so be prepared for that. But yeah, I think the action scenes are well done and realistic, and not too much bombast is put on them. And of course, the ending has been recreated so many times. Basically, the gunslinger walking in to finish off the bad guys, right, in the dusty streets. Well, it got pretty much to start here. And it's wonderfully stark, builds wonderful tension, and it's just a sight to behold. So, yeah, I mean, I don't want to go on too long here with the pros, because I could just go on forever and ever and ever. But suffice it to say, there's humor involved, there's drama to be had, there's a little bit of action to be had, a lot of intrigue, and it's just a highly recommended affair. So let's go ahead and give this thing a score. I'd say that by now you probably realize that with my effusive praise that this is going to get high marks for me. Well, let's not beat around the bush. This is a 5-star movie. I love this movie. I've watched it numerous times in just like the few months that I've had this. And I was watching it again today while I was eating lunch. It's a perfect movie to rewatch a couple times to pick up on like little nuances and cues. I'm still picking up things almost every time I watch it. Just something, either a hand gesture, the way he looks over at somebody. Maybe he's over there fiddling with something. Just what actually shows he's listening. And but just lots of little cues like that I love to pick up on. This movie is highly recommended. Do not let the subtitles scare you. It's not that hard to read along. Really, there's not an obscene amount of dialogue in this movie, right? So it's easy for even those who do not like subtitles. But I think there's a little something for everybody in this movie, and it's not to be missed. It's a great movie. It's a classic for a reason, and it was oft mimicked for a reason. This might be considered Kurosawa's masterpiece. A lot of people say Seven Samurai is. I probably watch this one a little more than Seven Samurai, just because I like the more personable approach, the less bigger groups. You can really focus in on the character of Sanjuro. So, highly recommended. I can't thank Jay enough for turning me on to these films and making sure that I saw them. And go out and watch this movie. I think you can find it over on Internet Archive for free. But whatever you do, find this movie and watch it, and then report back to me and let me know what you thought. So, 5-star movie. Can't recommend it enough, and that ought to do it. So hopefully you enjoyed this little retrospective review on a great movie, Yojimbo by Akira Kurosawa. If you do like what you see, please consider like and subscribing. Notice that I put the the addendums on there. And stay tuned for more of this stuff, because I'll be doing Sanjuro here in the near future. So thanks again for watching. Until next time, this is Genome. Just wondering where he can find some sake. At least non-alcoholic sake. Out.